So we're back with more Naoki Hamaguchi interviews where he clarifies some comments he made in regards to the structure of Remake Part 3 that were misconstrued and got some people a little bit worried. He also gives his thoughts on the success of Clair Obscur and what he thinks about AI. So let's talk about it. So just a heads up, some of the quotes we're covering today from Hamaguchi are a bit on the long side, so for the sake of time and brevity, I will be summarizing some of these quotes, but as always, in the description down below will be links to the full articles if you'd like to read them for yourself. But we start off first with an article from Ollie Reynolds of Nintendo Life, where they ask Hamaguchi does he feel any pressure from fans, but also from his own personal expectations in regards to the remake trilogy. He would say, "My honest feeling is that yes, there is pressure, I can't deny that, but I don't really let it get on top of me. It's just so satisfying and rewarding to have so many people out there waiting for your game. Having so many people play and enjoy these games is really special, so I'm having a lot of fun with it at the same time. One other thing is that the team we have working on this series is just really, really great. I'm blessed to have it, and it really supports me in making these games. It contains a lot of new people like myself who were fans of the original games, but then we also have a number of creators who worked on the original. So people like Tetsuya Nomura, Yoshinori Kitase, Motomo Toriyama, Kazushige Nojima. Having them really helps to ground it in the original and keep that essence of what made Final Fantasy VII what it was. In some sense, if it was just me and I was responsible for everything, then it might end up becoming my personal take on it as a fan. But together we're able to determine what is most important for the fans and create a modern piece of entertainment that still retains the core essence." Now, we've covered that topic before in older videos, but I wanted to bring it back up because eventually we're going to be nearing the end of our Final Fantasy VII Remake journey, and I just really want to reiterate how special and cool and unique this entire project is. But specifically looking at the dev team, this rarely happens, but this formation of people is like lightning in a bottle. To have the younger people like Hamaguchi who grew up playing the original Final Fantasies and are genuine fans and were so moved by those games that they pursued game development and are now working on the remake trilogy is super cool. But to also have those stalwarts there, the old guard, like Hamaguchi mentioned, the people that worked on the original game are working alongside you on this remake. That's such a cool combination of developers. And it's a combination we may not ever get again because we're nearing a point where people like Kitase, Nomura may want to eventually retire and they won't be working in games anymore. So this is a really special and unique time. And I want to reiterate that because there can be a lot of negativity surrounding the 7 Remake trilogy. And granted, I do think a lot of that is from a vocal minority. If people dislike something, they're more likely to be vocal about it than if they actually enjoyed it. And again, you have those people who have genuine criticisms that don't like the trilogy, and that's totally fine. I think that how you vocalize something is incredibly important. But you also do have those people who don't do that and would rather just trash the game, the developers, the people who are interested in it, and not really offer anything of value. And that side of the internet really, really sucks, man. And to see those types of grifters and people who probably don't even play these games, but they make it a living to go on Twitter and find these hate bandwagons that they can then jump onto and monetize, it really sucks. And I hate that that's made its way into gaming. It just sucks a lot of the fun and life out of it. And gaming is something that should be super fun for everyone, and everyone should be able to enjoy it and be inclusive. And so I just wanted to emphasize how cool and unique it is to have this type of lightning in a bottle situation with this dev team, because they're genuine fans. And I truly feel like this trilogy is in good hands, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not really concerned about Part 3. I think it's going to be great. I think they will stick the landing because these are people that genuinely care about the franchise. They know the ins and outs of what the fans are feeling, so it's a very well-rounded team of people, and I fully trust them with Part 3. Up next, they ask Hamaguchi, does he have plans to take a much-deserved break, or is he going to be working on future projects? He would say, in my position, I am the director of the 7 Remake series, so my biggest focus at the moment is getting Part 3 done and seeing fans' reaction to that. In addition, I'm also the head of Creative Studio 1, so that's involved in making other games, which I'm a part of. one big thing I'm looking forward to in the future is having the team I've put together work on something new. One thing that's common in the industry is that when a project is finished, the team is split and moved around, but that hasn't happened here. We've basically got the same guys all the way from the beginning of the project right through to the end. So I'm really looking forward to the game that we look to create after. It could be a Final Fantasy, it could be something completely different. I've not decided yet, but whatever it is, gamers who have paid attention and seen what we've done with the remake trilogy, they'll have great expectations and will look forward to seeing what the team come up with. So, if I were a betting man, I would assume Hamaguchi probably knows what he's going to be working on next. A lot of these companies plan their games far in advance, even while working on current games, so he probably has a good idea of what is coming in the future. But he's got to keep that on the DL. With that being said, whatever this team decides to do in the future, whether they revisit the universe of Final Fantasy VII like he's mentioned recently with DLC, or perhaps a new entry, or if they do something completely new like a Final Fantasy XVII or a brand new IP, I'm going to be excited to see what they do next. This is a really awesome team of people that know what they're doing. And again, moving into the future, you probably won't have the Katases and Nomuras with them, but majority of this development team, like Hamaguchi says, has stayed together, which is very rare. And I think that's one of the reasons why something like Rebirth was able to come out as fast as it did and as good as it did, because everyone who knew their jobs were in their proper places and worked together really well, and are managed by someone like Hamaguchi, who is seemingly a really good leader, who we'll dive a little bit further into in another article about how he has, some advantages as not just being a director, but a programmer. I think he's able to really lead these people and produce things that are really good and efficient. Up next, they ask Hamaguchi, are there any other Final Fantasy games he would like to see get remade? He would go on to say that if Square Enix thinks that there is an opportunity there, if it's a good business thing, that's something that they would obviously consider. However, because he's devoted nearly 10 plus years of his life to the 7 Remake project, he doesn't want it to be him to lead the next remake project. However, if there is someone else within the company, much like he was when he first joined this project, that is really passionate about remaking another Final Fantasy, maybe on the scale of what they're doing with 7 Remake, he obviously would back them up. And there's obviously a really big opportunity there for Square Enix to remake older Final Fantasies or remaster them, or even just release the original versions of these games so that way people have much easier access to them. There was a really interesting article that came out recently from GOG, who is a company that specializes in game preservation, and they worked recently with Capcom to preserve the original Resident Evil trilogy. And GOG talked about their experience with Capcom being really nuts because the folks over at Capcom were confused as to why GOG would want to preserve these games. They're like, we got the remakes. The remakes are bigger, they're better, they're superior. Why would you want to go play the old game? And GOG had to convince them that, look, there's still a market there of people that want the original games. They value the original experience, which is what I agree with. I love the remakes of Resident Evil, but I don't think they replace the originals. For me, they stand side by side. Those are two completely different games with two completely different types of experiences. Maybe one day I do want to jump back to OG RE2. Maybe some days I want to play the remake. But the fact that they had to be convinced of that is a little concerning. But I don't know if Square Enix is necessarily in that same mindset. They've been pretty good for the most part about preserving some of their older games, re-releasing them on modern hardware like the OG FF7, a remastered version of 8 and 9 and 10 and 10.2, and of course there's the Pixel remasters. So Square Enix is just in a really cool position right now where they can do these big scale remakes, they can do smaller scale remakes and remasters, or just preserve the original game, which is pretty cool. Up next, we move over to an article by Andy Robinson of VGC. Now this is where a lot of the summarization is going to come into play because Hamaguchi is a talker and he's got a lot of things to say. For this first question though, I'll be reading his answer verbatim. But it starts off with the porting process, to which Hamaguchi gets into the nitty-gritty of it, but he also says that because he's a programmer and a director, he has a distinct advantage that many other directors may not have. He says, I think there is actually one big advantage in my favor here that maybe other directors wouldn't have, is that I started out as an engineer and have a very strong programming background. So I very much understand the technical side of development as well. For example, you get directors, maybe who aren't originally engineers, who are more on the creative side. They obviously would have that issue where they have got this massive creative vision, but then afterwards discovered that to actually achieve that, there are these restrictions, there are these limitations, and technically that is really difficult. Because I have both, I have the understanding of the technical side and the system requirements as well, and I have generally got a very good idea of what level of hardware specs allows a certain creative decision to be realized or not. So in that sense, it is very synchronized, which is a really cool and unique position to be in. Again, Hamaguchi's been working at Square Enix for well over 20 years now. I think he said he's coming up on 24, 25 years working for the company, and he started initially as an engineer and a programmer, and he's worked on a ton of games and eventually would work his way up to the Final Fantasy XIII series, where he would lead the third game in the franchise, Lightning Returns, as its director. But that's a really cool advantage to have, because sometimes you may have a director or a creative director that has these really cool ideas for the story and the characters, exploration, the overall gameplay mechanics, but then when it comes to put it into practice, that's when they run into those technical limitations and have to sometimes scrap entire ideas or completely rework them in order for them to actually work. But because Hamaguchi comes from a programming background, he can take these really cool ideas that he may have or people on the team may have, run them in his internal computer and realize, okay, this is doable. We can do that. We can't do this. We've got to scale back on this. Oh, the technical aspect might interfere with this aspect of gameplay. And again, that's just a really big advantage, especially when it comes to dev time, because he knows already what will and what won't work. That's a really big asset to have on your team, especially for a leader. Up next, they talk about how busy and hectic Hamaguchi's schedule actually is, because as of right now, he's currently in London doing a panel, meeting fans. He's been traveling all across the world, so the man is tired, and he essentially says that yeah, he's technically waist deep in development for Remake Part 3 right now, but getting to meet all of the fans, that's motivation that pushes him forward to make sure that this game is as good as it can possibly be, so it's making him work a lot harder. But he also talks about the time zone differences and how he could be anywhere in the world and he still has to communicate with Japan. And there are times where he's got a flight, and because these flights now have Wi-Fi, it allows him to work. So from the moment he gets on that plane, he opens up that laptop and he starts working. And he has a really funny quote in regards to the flight attendants that see him do that. He says, "A lot of the time I get flight attendants who will come to me and say, wow, I don't see that many people just working constantly the whole time. Are you okay? Do you want me to bring you something? I'm really happy that they look after me, but it's a little bit embarrassing." I love little anecdotes like that. I think it humanizes the people behind these games. It kind of gives us an idea of, what their personality is like, what they go through on a daily basis, because for a lot of us, we're just like, okay, he's promoting the game, but then he's going back and sitting at a computer and coding and stuff, but there's so much that goes into it that we just don't think about or even see on a daily basis, and that's including constantly communicating with your team that is in a different time zone and doing all this incredibly crazy, tedious stuff. So hopefully he does get some downtime in the future after Part 3 comes out and they do all of their, multi-platform stuff and before they move into their next project. But the dude is a machine, he's a hard worker, and I just really appreciate little anecdotes like that. Now up next, Hamaguchi clears up some confusion over a recent interview where he said that Part 3 would be more concise compared to Rebirth. Now I would love to summarize this, but I think it's important that we get Hamaguchi's full quote out there for clarity. He says, "That's actually something I wanted to speak about today, so I'm glad you asked that. Just to explain, the original question I was asked there was, they said that there are some people who played Rebirth, the second game in the series, and they felt that because we've added in new story content which wasn't in the original, to them it felt like the story was being stretched out. So they asked whether we were considering doing anything related to that in the third game. In terms of the result of Rebirth and the ultimate experience that it delivered to players, that's actually something that I'm very confident in. I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet too much, but the way I work as a director, I don't think there are that many other directors out there who, to the level that I do this, are playing through the games that I'm directing, sitting there and going through them and playing them again and again and again, just to try and see if the gameplay experience and the balance feels right. Because I do so much of that in my daily job, that's a really important thing. I've put a lot of effort into that. There can't be that many other directors who put that much emphasis on that. I feel that the pacing, the content, and the balance in Rebirth is exactly as I wanted it. I personally don't feel it's been stretched out. It doesn't feel unnecessarily long. To me, I think I got that right. and I think a lot of people would agree with me. But obviously, I understand that there are maybe people who would see it like that and maybe feel differently. That's fine. I see the people who express those opinions, and that's definitely worth taking on board that some people felt that. However, for the third game, in terms of what I said about that and the way I'm looking at that is about improving the pacing and making sure that to achieve an even greater level of immersion in the game, we make sure that the story developments move forward in a fairly speedy manner and with the right pace essentially, rather than feeling slow and drawn out. I think that may have been misconstrued by people. They may have said, okay, that means they're going to cut down on the volume, and they're going to remove story content. It's going to be a shorter game. They're going to cut it down. And that's not what I'm saying at all. It's about making sure the pacing feels right. It's not about cutting out content. It's making sure that it feels right. The speed that the story progresses at feels right. And it is fairly quick and feels like you can get through it at a reasonable pace. But it has to feel right. So that's what I mainly intended to say there. Personally, I was kind of surprised that that's how people took that quote. I took that quote meaning as what he said here, in that they want to focus on fixing the pacing for part 3, because one of the criticisms I've had of Remake and Rebirth is that it kind of feels like the story stuff doesn't really drive home until the very end of the game, the last quarter. So I was like, okay, cool. They're going to restructure how they pace out the game. Awesome. But I didn't realize people took that as, oh, they're going to cut content. So I'm glad he cleared that up. But looking at the pacing of Remake and Rebirth, if you're just playing those games from beginning to end, only focusing on the campaign and not doing any side stuff, they're really awesome. They're a breeze to get through. They don't feel overly long. It feels really well paced out from beginning to end. Again, I do have some criticisms with the story stuff. I wish they had a little bit more of that. But if you're just speed running it or beelining it, it feels pretty good. But taking into consideration like the full game as a whole, if you're doing the story and you're also trying to work in the side quest stuff, I could see how that would feel like maybe it feels like it's being a bit too stretched out. But obviously a lot of that side stuff is optional. And again, I'll echo my past self. It's a little weird to complain about a ton of content being in a game, especially when it's optional. Granted, some of that content has cool stuff hidden behind it, so I understand that criticism there. But thankfully he cleared that up, and they're not gonna just remove stuff and cut the game down. I expect part 3 to have just as much content as Rebirth, if not more. I just hope that when it comes to the side stuff, the side quests, the mini games, I just hope that that is also paced out a little differently instead of, getting to a new area and then doing all the side stuff and then trying to get back on track with the story. I think they need to just find a way to pace out how the side stuff and mini games are delivered to make it feel better paced, which I think they will do. And the fact that Hamaguchi is addressing it, he understands, like, yeah, that's a genuine criticism that we need to focus on for part 3 is how we pace out the story and how all of that develops. Now up next, they bring up Clair Obscur, its success, but also some similarities to the Final Fantasy XIII series, which Hamaguchi did work on. Now, to summarize this, Hamaguchi does say, yeah, when Clair Obscur came out, he did see some similarities between their combat system and what they did in Final Fantasy XIII, specifically with Lightning Returns. Now, I have not played Lightning Returns, so I can't vouch for that comparison, but if you're someone who did, maybe you could, further clarify that in the comments. But he goes on to make a point that I've been trying to make for months now, in that Clair Obscur is a wonderful game from top to bottom, but it's not successful purely because of its turn-based mechanics, which is a narrative some people did take when the game came out and it was reviewing well and selling really well, is, oh, the game is doing great because it's a turn-based JRPG-like, which then led into some conversations, some with genuine criticism, some very disingenuous, of people comparing it to Final Fantasy and, oh, Clair Obscur is the real Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy sucks now, and because it's not turn-based, it's not really Final Fantasy. It gets really messy. But much like what Hamaguchi says, it's successful because it's such a well-rounded product. The story, the writing, the characters, the performances, the gameplay, the music, the exploration, the fact that it's such a heavily French game that is very different for a lot of gaming audiences, and it feels really different and unique. All of these aspects come together to help create a pretty wonderful game that feels fresh and fun and unique. And the devs at Sandfall, who created Clair Obscur, haven't been shy about saying, yeah, we've been heavily influenced by Final Fantasy, by games like Sekiro, by Persona, They found a way to take their life experiences, their culture, their gaming inspirations, and create their own version of what they wanted to see, which is pretty cool. He even compares the story to what a modern day drama series would do by kind of telling the story at a bit of a slower pace. You've got a mystery there, and that's what really hooks people in from a story standpoint, is you gotta see what happens next. And he just wants to make sure that people appreciate that game because it is such a complete product and not purely because of its gameplay mechanics, the turn-based with the real-time action stuff integrated into it. Also, I want to add, it's a competitively priced video game at $50. In this day and age where gaming is becoming more and more expensive, people are going to be more picky and choosy about what they spend their hard-earned money on. And if they hear very good things about a $50 game, they're going to be more inclined to check that out over something that is $70 or $80. So there's a lot of circumstances that go into Clair Obscur being as good as it is and as successful as it is. And I'm just happy that, there's a dev out there being like, it's more than just its mechanics, my dude. It's got a really great story. It's got great characters, all that stuff. And for Hamaguchi to be a developer and a fan, someone who I believe is currently playing through Expedition 33, he can recognize all of those assets and just kind of hammer it home to people like there's more to it than just those JRPG influenced gameplay mechanics. Now up next, they have a bit of a silly question, and this actually comes from Ben Starr, Clive Rosfield himself, Verso from the aforementioned Clair Obscur, and he gave a question to VGC to ask Hamaguchi, and that was, could Ben Starr voice a golden chocobo in Remake Part 3? Hamaguchi says, I'll ask the team if they want to do that. I've got the impression he's kind of the guy that, at every event you go to, he's there. So I'm going to have to see him at London Comic-Con this weekend, because I'd imagine he'd probably be there as well. I'll look forward to seeing him. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We will never escape Ben Starr, which is not a bad thing. It's so cool to see his career really blow up with Final Fantasy XVI, and then he's getting all these other roles like in Kazan, Clair Obscur as Verso, where he's really able to show the range that he has as a performer. It's really cool to see a genuinely good dude like him find success and be the face of a lot of these games. And personally, I'm half joking, I'm also half serious, but if in Remake Part 3, we work hard to get the golden chocobo, and it doesn't come out saying work, it comes out this older, wizened, special chocobo with the voice of Ben Starr, I think would be hilarious. It would kind of fit within the goofy tone that Final Fantasy VII sometimes has. Again, it's not going to happen, but I think that would be really funny to have a golden chocobo that just sounds like Ben Starr. But it probably won't happen. But I do hope they find a way to squeeze Ben into Remake Part 3 in some capacity. Maybe he's an NPC, maybe he plays a side character. I think it'd be cool to see him involved in the 7 Remake trilogy. Now up next, we have some final words from Hamaguchi that are very strong and confident. He says, 2 final things from me. First of all, we're working really hard on the 3rd game in the remake series at the moment. It's coming along really well. I've got in my head the vision now, the gameplay structure, the gameplay experience, the core experience, and it's looking in a really good state. It's something really satisfying that gamers can get their teeth into, and it'll be just a brilliant experience that it really should be and has to be. So we're going to work on that, brush that up even further, and then deliver it in the not too distant future. You really can look forward to that climax of the series, and it'll be exactly what you want it to be. So don't worry about that. It's coming, and it's just as good as you think it is. I'm very confident in the game that I'm making there. Now, obviously, again, this is PR stuff. He has to be positive about his game. He's not going to be like, dude, we're in trouble. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a mess. Someone please come save me. He's not going to be like that. But obviously, too, to point out, and this is really big, Japanese developers are usually very reserved when they promote their games. You very rarely will see them act like Hamaguchi is. A lot of times, they'll be like, we worked really hard. We're excited for you to see what we've made. Please enjoy our game. That's it. Usually very low-key and reserved, but Hamaguchi is like, dude, I'm confident. I love what we made. You're gonna love it. Everyone's loving it. It's very rare to see a developer take this kind of stance, a Japanese one in particular, about their game. So for me, I truly feel that he believes what he's saying and that what they have is genuinely really good. So again, like, take that into consideration. A lot of Japanese devs don't normally speak like this, and for him to be as confident as he is, that's really exciting, you know? And hopefully in the not too distant future, maybe the Game Awards, we get a trailer that kind of whets the appetite, lets us know what the game's going to be called. Maybe it's a slightly beefier trailer than a regular teaser. We don't really know. But again, these are pretty big words coming from Hamaguchi, and even Katase was getting in on this a while back. He's like, I'm blown away by some of the stuff Hamaguchi and the team have come up with. So keep in mind, these aren't just PR words, they genuinely mean what they say, and it's very rare for a Japanese developer to act this way. And to close out the video, we move over to Games Radar with an article by Ian Harris. Now, they do say that they have a full article with Hamaguchi that will be released in chunks over the course of the next few days, and their words here, beyond. So I think, unless there's some really big, massive breaking news, I will try and wait until that full article gets released instead of covering one article at a time. I don't want to do one video for one paragraph. That's a waste of people's time, and it just feels kind of slimy. So if you see some of these articles come out and I'm not covering them right away, it's just because I'm waiting. But we get into the controversial topic of AI. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you will know I do not like AI. ChatGPT, character AI, generative AI, I despise that stuff. I think it's horrible for the environment. It's horrible for our human brains. It steals from genuine, real creative people. And there are those out there that will use it for much more disgusting, nefarious means that completely violate someone's consent. I hate it. I think it sucks. But unfortunately, it's very clear that AI is here and it's here to stay. Not much we can do about that. So my mentality is, use it sparingly. Use it for the more mundane, tedious tasks and not to replace people, and be lazy. But Games Radar goes on to say, to start, Hamaguchi makes it clear that Square Enix currently has no set down policies or rules on AI, whether it should be used, how it should be used, and so on. Giving his own take on the chatter though, he says that the use of AI on the creative side of game development, certainly at the moment, is not something that I could really go ahead with. They continue by saying, for Hamaguchi, adopting a more efficient approach to game development is undoubtedly an important topic to keep tabs on, though it is also a bigger topic than AI alone. Hamaguchi then says, the idea that game creation is a very complicated business is a lot of different working, moving parts and things to be aware of. Certainly in terms of the money-making side of it, assigning staff and managing teams, he says through a translator, obviously these are things we need to think of solutions for and be aware of. I would like to think, as a creator and as part of my creative team, that however much AI might try and intrude and take part in the creative side of things, as humans, as my team, we would want to be good enough creators that we can do better than AI, and we're definitely going to push that. That's the approach I want to take. Say it louder for the people in the back, Hamaguchi-san. To get his firm stance on AI, I love it. It pretty much falls in line with how I feel. Again, there are the more mundane, tedious stuff that AI can probably help with, but it will never replace a person. AI can try and replicate movies, TV shows, acting performances, video games, but it will always be a soulless product. It doesn't have the heart, the passion, the drive, the experience, the talent that a real person contains. And I love that he's basically just like, yeah, we're going to be better than AI. AI is not as good as us. It can't touch us. Like, we will always be superior and we will work our butts off to always be better than AI. So it's nice to end the video on a positive note. So with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you guys think of the topics we covered in today's video? Do you agree with Hamaguchi and me in regards to the success of Clair Obscur and how it's not just because of its gameplay, it's because it's a really great, well-rounded package? And do you have any thoughts on the pacing of the remake trilogy? Do you hope to see it change in part 3? Let me know in those comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.